I say this because we tend to group. Grouping can be done for the other categories, but the important people, the very important people, always recognize them by name individually. Second, do not use expressions like beloved so and so, because if you say beloved to one person and you don't use beloved for the next person, the second person is going to be offended. Why only he or she is beloved, I am not beloved? So be a little careful when you use expressions like most respected, beloved for one person, and you don't use anything at all. The best thing to do, the simplest would be to prefix the designation before the name. That way it's okay. Designation followed by the name will be the simplest, easiest and straightforward way, so that everybody is treated equally. Having said this, let us now move on to what are the ingredients of any public speech. A public speech is very different from a lecture that you might give on some occasion. A public speech has got certain ingredients, certain components which we must be aware of as officers in the bank. If you are aware of this, you will be able to incorporate as many of these ingredients so that your public speech becomes more effective. So for that, I'm going to give you the first handout. It will give you a framework of the ingredients of a public speech. I'll take you through all these components, all the ingredients mentioned in this with examples. So the first handout will be in your hands in a minute. With you is a framework which shows you that public speaking comes in 3 stages. The first stage, as you can see, is the stage of preparation, also known as pre-speech planning. The first stage is the stage of preparation. The second stage is the stage of platform performance. And the third stage is the stage of excellence. There are 3 stages, and in each of these stages, there are many steps. It is important for us as officers to be aware that if you can make sure that most of these components are there in a public speech, your speech will go to a level of excellence which you would not have thought about before. So that is why I am taking you through these steps so that you are aware of it, and when the need comes to give a public speech, you will have as many of these ingredients in your public speech. The first stage is the stage of preparation, also known as the stage of pre-speech planning. What you do before you actually give the speech. Very important, very crucial, very critical if your speech has to be successful. This first stage has got several steps, and the first step in the first stage is what we call information or data collection. That is the first step, first stage. If you have to give a public speech and you know you have to gather information, you have to collect data, you start as soon as you can. Once you know you have to give a speech, maybe 2 weeks from now or 1 week from now or a few days from now, the first thing you do is to collect information. You collect data. You gather as much information as possible. You are building a bank. You are building a bank of information from which you will draw what is necessary for you to speak. This might look very simple. Why is it that I am telling you this? I am saying this because the more information you have, the more you have in the bank, the more options you will have to select what you need to speak. So it's always important that you collect as much information as possible, and that is bank building, data collection, information gathering. Call it what you will, but basically you are building a bank, and that is the first step in public speaking. Collecting information, collecting data. while collecting information, collecting data, there is no particular order. You can collect it in any order. There is no limit to the information you might collect. So there is no limit, no order. You collect data, you build a bank. Just as in your bank, there is simply no limit to what you can keep. Of course, now there are some limits, but generally, there is no limit. If you build your bank, if you build the bank of information, you are now ready to go to the next step, and that is editing. Editing is the second step in the preparation stage or the pre-speech planning stage. Editing means two things: selection and sequencing. Selection means selecting from the bank what you need for the 3-minute speech. What are the most relevant ideas, most suitable ideas for that 3-minute speech? So you decide, in that 3 minutes, I can probably put across 8 ideas or 7 ideas or 10 ideas. You decide. And that is selection. Then comes sequencing. Sequencing means what is the order in which you're going to speak. Will your story come first? Will the quotation come first? Will your message come last? What will come in the middle? You decide, depending on the audience, depending on the topic, depending on what impact you want it to have, you decide the sequence. So editing means selection and sequencing. If you have done these first 2 steps, you are now ready for the third, and that is writing of a speech. Now you might wonder, is it necessary to write every speech? Well, important speeches are best written once, so that you get a sense of timing. You know that you can speak only 3 minutes or 5 minutes. So that you get a sense of timing, also to get a sense of the language, the unfamiliar terms that are there in your speech. You might be introducing someone, you might be talking about things which you would not have spoken about before. The terms might be unfamiliar. So to enable you to get familiar with the terms, to enable you to get a sense of timing, it is important that you write the speech. But it is also important that you do not memorize your speech. Because if you memorize your speech, you will get stuck with the language. It happened to me a few years ago when I had to give a speech. I had memorized the speech. Halfway through the speech, I forgot one sentence and I could not proceed. I was waiting, hoping that I will recall that particular sentence because it was necessary for me to connect with the rest of the speech. What happened was, I was not able to get that one sentence because I had memorized the speech. I waited, I paused, and I paused so long that they thought the speech is over and it was time to applaud, and they all applauded. I went and sat down. The speech was not over. What happens is, if you memorize a speech, you will get stuck with the language. It is important that language be your personal function. You must not memorize words in such a way that unless you get it in that sequence, you will not be able to proceed. That should not happen. So language must be your personal function. Ideas must be there. So when you write a speech, don't memorize it. Unless, of course, you're reading a speech. Then, of course, it's different. But otherwise, do not memorize a speech if you're giving it offhand. Just the ideas must be there. Language must be your personal function. And then comes your fourth step, speech plan cards. Once your speech is written, convert those ideas in your speech into a card, a simple card on which you write your ideas. Do not take very colorful cards. In your home, there might be some Christmas cards, there might be some Diwali cards, and then you bring these very attractive looking cards and you stand in front of an audience. People suddenly get interested what is behind the card. People will not be interested in your speech because this is a source of distraction. So be aware, when you bring a card, it is always better bring a card that does not distract the audience from what you are going to speak, because your speech is the ultimate. The focus should be on the speech. Do not bring very attractive cards which might cause people to be looking at the picture that is behind. It's better that you bring a card rather than a paper. Why do I say a card is better? Because one is the card is easy to carry. A card you can easily carry, you can put it in your pocket, you can put it into your purse, you can, wherever. It's very convenient to hold. Sometimes when you go to speak in public forums, you will not have a lectern. If you don't have a lectern, if you have a paper in front of you, it will be very cumbersome to hold a paper. These papers can be a little bit of a nuisance, especially when you don't have a lectern. And then you will have to hold it, and sometimes it will fold backwards. There will be challenges. So holding a paper is a little more cumbersome, so it is not advisable because you don't know what that venue for the public speaking will be like, because you're not sure that always there will be a lectern. So cards that way are comfortable to hold. Very often the paper that you bring also may be very old. It might be from your first standard notebook. Now you are 10, 15, 20 years almost later. But it might be from your first standard notebook. You have torn it. It's already brittle, very old paper which you probably will not require. So you thought you will tear it. And then you tear it, you fold it and fold it and fold it and put it in your pocket. And you're waiting there for your name to be called. And then you're already nervous, you're already shivering, you are sweating. And then you come, by the time you come here, this paper which is already brittle, it is already full of sweat, and then you take it out, you keep it here, and then the fan is running full blast, and this brittle paper is in pieces, and everybody runs after your speech which is in pieces. So there is a risk involved with paper. It will not be available to you when you need it. So be aware, when you bring paper, there are some risks involved, unless you are absolutely sure that this paper will be handled properly. Otherwise, there can be challenges. So card is safer. You also feel comfortable that this card is not likely to fly away, less likely to fly away, because it is much more easier to handle and also to keep. It is important that you pay attention to this first stage. I'm spending time on this only because as public speakers, today people are going to listen to you only because you have content. They are not going to be fooled by all the rhetoric, by all the spirit, all the dynamism of your public speaking. I recall an army major who was asked to give a speech. And he said, it was Army Day. And he said, today is Army Day. Today is not Air Force Day. Today is not Navy Day. Army Day is celebrated by the Army. Army Day is not celebrated by the Navy. Army Day is not celebrated by the Air Force. Army Day is celebrated on the ground. Army Day is not celebrated in the sea. Army Day is not celebrated in the air. Today is Army Day. Today is not Navy Day. Today is not Air Force Day. There is nothing there in that speech. Absolutely nothing. You may do it with a lot of gusto, with a lot of energy. But when people realize that what you are speaking, there is nothing, no substance, people are going to be cheesed out. They are not going to be impressed. They know that this is only all style, no substance. So be aware, please pay attention. People have come to listen to you. Out of respect for the people who have come to listen to you, please give enough thought, forethought, so that you plan what you're going to speak, and that is itself the first indication that you respect the people who have come to listen to you. So please take care of that. Never go unprepared, because the moment you go unprepared, people know that this person is just rambling and not talking about something which he has probably thought about in advance. If you have done this much, you are now ready for the second stage. We call it platform performance. Now, what is platform performance? Platform performance is all that you do once you have arrived behind the lectern. Now, the lecterns today are designed in such a way that it hides most of your body. An ideal lectern should be just a single wooden support or a metallic support and probably a platform, a small platform to enable what you want to read to be kept there. Unfortunately, lecterns today are quite huge because we try to put in a lot of other things. Inside the lectern, we have the computer and so many other gadgets we add, and in the process, lecterns become quite gigantic. As if you are at the risk of assassination, you hide behind the lectern, and in the process, your dress is not seen, your nice sari that you are wearing is not seen, your suit is not seen. Ideally, a lectern should be as you would see in a church. A single support, and on top of it, a provision to keep the paper. That's how it should be. If you have a lectern, please make sure you deal with the lectern as it should be dealt with. Now, what do I mean by deal with the lectern as it should be dealt with? The first thing you should not do is to lean on the lectern. Leaning on the lectern is an indication that you want to put your weight, you want to give your full support on the lectern, which is not necessary. It happened some years ago. I went for a conference. We had an international speaker, and this speaker didn't realize that this lectern was supported by a single screw. He, in his enthusiasm, stood like this and said, "Ladies and gentlemen," and because of the weight, this lectern just gave way and just collapsed suddenly near his feet. He was so terrified by what happened because it could have hurt him, and he didn't realize that this tremendous force with which that lectern collapsed stunned him. He could not speak for the next half a minute or so, because he realized that he could have been very badly hurt, his feet could have been hurt. He also didn't realize that this will collapse. Remember, the lectern is not intended to take your weight. Some people are a little more adventurous, they hug the lectern. Now, why do you want to hug the lectern of all the things? Hugging the lectern is an indication of your nervousness. You want to hide your nervousness. In the process, you hug the lectern. I saw one college principal once. He not only hugged the lectern, he started disrobing the lectern. The lectern was decorated. There were flowers, there was velvet, all sorts of things, some things that were covering the lectern. And this gentleman didn't realize, in his nervousness, he disrobed the lectern, and the organizers were terrified. What is happening? Because one Om, which was not supposed to be seen, suddenly appeared, because it was a very secular function, and then suddenly one Om appeared, and they were a little concerned what all this man is doing. Finally, they had to rearrange. You can imagine this adventurous speaker, in his enthusiasm, had created so much of discomfort for the organizer. So please leave the lectern alone. Do not hug it. Do not disrobe it. Lectern is not meant to be dealt with that way. If you take a stand from behind the lectern, maintain a respectful distance from the lectern, keep what you want to read, and then speak. You must stand straight without leaning on it, without hugging it, without disrobing it. If you have done this, you must also make sure that the microphone receives what you are speaking. Because of your constant viewing of MTV, as soon as you come, you will hold the microphone, not realizing that you are nervous. And in your nervousness, your shivering is already conveyed throughout the auditorium, because this you don't realize. If you hold the microphone, first of all, there will be some sort of an echo. And on top of it, in your nervousness, you don't realize that you are conveying this, you are advertising it, you are announcing it throughout the hall, that you are a little nervous standing in front of all of you. So make sure you leave the microphone, leave everything alone. They will come and adjust. And if you have done that, you are now ready for the next step, and that is gesture. If you take a stand, that will enable you to look at everybody. Please make sure when you give a public speech, you use your hands judiciously. Judicious use of hands means use it when necessary, don't use it unnecessarily. It becomes somewhat abnormal if you stand like this and speak, because public speaking, especially when you stand like this and speak, is not appropriate. If I put my hands in front, this is terrible. This is not the way to speak. If I stand with my hands on either side, this is too rigid a position. And if you don't know what to do with the hands, you'll put your hands into your pocket, and slowly some coins will fall, some change will fall, your handkerchief will fall. Then everybody will be after your coins and your change, and all these things have become very precious now, so they'll come and pick it up. And in the process, what will happen is People are after the contents of your pocket. They are not after your speech. The speech is forgotten. So please remember not to do anything untoward with your hands, because there can be challenges. The most difficult things to handle are the hands, especially when you're aware, when you're conscious of the hands. The simplest thing is to allow your hands to rest gently on the lectern. Once in a way, when you are speaking, you can use your hands to convey, to reinforce what you're trying to say. I'm saying this because in public speaking, all the movement is restricted above the waist. You don't have the mobility that you have in a lecture situation. You have to speak from a public platform. You can move your head, you can move the upper part of your body and perhaps the hands. So it is important that you use your hands judiciously, just enough to convey what you are trying to say. Third is eye contact. The third step in the second stage is eye contact. Eye contact is important, and it's quite different from the eye contact you maintain in other situations. It may so happen, as very often happens in India, in a public function, the women are seated all on one side and the men are on one side. And if I stand here and only look at the women and start speaking, the men are going to be jealous. Look at this fellow, he's looking only at the women. Or if I feel shy, I can't look this side, I look at the men, the women are going to be offended. Are we not beautiful enough to be looked at? There might be so you must make sure that you look at everybody. You can't be looking at only one segment of the audience. Also, looking at one person in the audience can cause problem. Once you arrive behind the lectern, you observe that one person is known to you. You recognize that person. So you look at that person, you smile. And that smile is acknowledged because that person has to smile. You look at the person and he smiles at you, you also smile. The smile is only between us. What has happened to all? You all don't get the smile. This is one risk. If you recognize people and then you smile or acknowledge, somebody has to acknowledge, and that acknowledgement will come either as a smile or they'll be a little embarrassed. When you look persistently at that person, he will not know where to look. He will look at your shoe. Then you also look at the shoe. You think something wrong with the shoe. Everybody is looking at your shoe. They are not worried about your speech. This is what happens. When you look at somebody long enough, it will cause embarrassment. They won't know where to look. They will look at some part of your anatomy. And then you think something is wrong with you, and then you become conscious. It is important that you don't look long enough to cause embarrassment. More so when you look at a lady and you look at her long enough, she starts adjusting her sari, then you know you've not been looking at her properly. Now, these are the risks involved. Do not look long enough to cause embarrassment. In public speaking, this can happen. You identify somebody, you look at somebody, and in the process of looking long enough, you might cause embarrassment. So do not do that. Allow yourself to go from one end to the other, look at everybody, but do not cause any embarrassment. And that is what I mean by saying eye contact. The ability, everybody is an image. You don't recognize individuals. Then comes pause. Pause is that silence, a few seconds of silence that you give when you have said something very important, so that that idea sinks in. People don't expect it. Suddenly you have said something and that idea has to sink in. When the Prime Minister spoke to the nation a few days ago and said the 500 rupee note and the 1000 rupee notes are demonetized, he followed it up with a pause. He said it and he followed it up with a pause. Those few seconds that he gave us a pause is an opportunity for that idea to sink in. So that when you have said something very deliberate, very important, very sensitive, please follow it up with a pause. He couldn't have immediately proceeded with the next sentence. That is the importance of pause. Important things, when they have been said, please follow it up with a pause. It is equivalent to allowing that idea to sink in. So please plan that. If that has to be done, it has to be done in your pre-speech planning. You will know when to give the pause, because that pause must come after an announcement has been made, something significant has been said. Allow that idea to sink in. Use it and it will have its impact. If you quickly start off immediately after you have made something very important or very significant, that will be totally lost. People won't even register. They won't know. So it's important that you give that silence. It's very important. And pause in a public speech is very, very powerful. The power of silence. The power of silence after something important has been said. Then comes stress. Stress is the emphasis you give on a word in a sentence so that the meaning is correctly conveyed. John walked down Main Street today. 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 If John walking down Main Street today is important, you will say John walked down Main Street today. And please see speakers when they speak today. Important messages are best conveyed when you give stress at the right places. Again, look at speakers who leave you with your hearts thumping. They are people who give emphasis on the right words. And that is decided in the pre-speech planning stage. If it's an important speech, make sure where the emphasis will come. Underline it, highlight it, block it in such a way that when the time comes, even if you're reading the speech, please give emphasis. Emphasis will change the meaning. It will make the meaning that you want, it can mar the meaning that you want. So make sure that if you have to give emphasis, make sure that you give the emphasis on the right word. Then comes voice pitch modulation. Voice pitch modulation is that undulation, that up and down movement, that ability to raise your voice when you are conveying something very important, very significant, very powerful. It is not shouting. It is giving strength to your voice. There will also be times when you will lower the voice, as if you are in the deep depths of the ocean, as if you are whispering, almost tenderly, almost delicately, almost sensitively conveying something very important. When the Prime Minister spoke to the nation a couple of years ago, and he was talking about that particular incident, assault in Delhi, and he said, even a rapist is the son of a father and a mother. You don't ask your son where he is if it is a late night, but you always ask your daughter where she was if it is a late night. Now, of course, he said in English, in Hindi, but what I am trying to say is, these were very sensitive, delicate things which he was trying to convey to the nation. He could not have done this with a lot of power in his voice. He had to do it gently, delicately, sensitively. There are times when you will drop your voice. There are times when you will raise your voice. What you are going to speak will determine when you will raise the voice, when you will drop the voice. You cannot do both continuously, because then it will become monotonous. There will be times when you will raise your voice. There will also be times when you will drop your voice. Speakers who have an impact are those who are able to raise their voice and lower their voice and not maintain the same monotonous tone of a monologue. Then it becomes truly boring. So a speech must have its highs and lows, and in between it is like driving a car. There will be times when you will go fast. There will be times when you will go slow. There will be times when you will simply pause. So in a public speech, it must have all that you do when you drive. So you must be planning for it, and that must be planned at the time of your pre-speech planning. If you have done all this, your speech will become effective. But effectiveness alone is not enough. As officers, you must be able to give excellent speeches. What does excellent speech mean? Excellence in public speaking means taking it to a different dimension. And that is the first rhetorical question. The first step in excellence is rhetorical question. A rhetorical question is a question that you will ask and you will answer quickly the way you want it. You don't want the answer from the audience. You answer it the way you want it. Ladies and gentlemen, is it possible for any man or woman to speak from a public platform like this? Yes, ladies and gentlemen, it is possible for any man or woman to speak from a public platform like this. What did I do just now? I asked a question. Is it possible for any man or woman to speak from a public platform like this. And I said quickly, yes, here you don't give pause. Then somebody will say no. Then you are in trouble. Don't give a pause. Here, no silence, no pause. Rhetorical question requires you to answer it quickly, immediately. Ask the question, answer it immediately after you have asked the question. Answer it exactly as you want it. Look at public speakers today. They will ask a question, not that they don't know the answer. They ask the question so that you start thinking. Even before you complete the thinking process, the thought process is still on. He or she will quickly follow it up with the answer the way he or she wants it answered. That is a rhetorical question. A question that you will ask and you will answer exactly as you want it. And that is going to give your public speech a flavor which will not be there if you don't have a rhetorical question. So it will definitely give it that extra flavor. Then comes a flourish. Now, what is a flourish? A flourish is a decoration for a speech. A flourish is repetitive use of words so that it gives that extra kick. It gives that extra fillip to your speaking. To make you understand what is a flourish, I will read something to you. You will immediately understand what is meant by a flourish. The story of Manipal is the story of imagination. The story of Manipal is the story of inspiration. The story of Manipal is the story of innovation. The story of Manipal is the story of the initiative of its founder and builder, whatever. Now, what am I saying? The story of. Look at another example. I'll just give you an example of what a flourish is. This was a situation where I was introducing Justice Venkatachalaya at a public function, and I'm just showing you how a flourish can be used. To do the honors today, there could not have been a more appropriate person than our chief guest, a man of such astounding accomplishments, a man of such exemplary erudition, a man of such impeccable integrity, a man of such varied interests, a man of such unquestionable honesty, a man of such unfailing courtesy, a man who has adorned the highest office of the apex court, a man who is a paragon for judges and lawyers, a man who is worthy of emulation. I am referring to Justice M.N. Venkatachalaya. Repetitive use of words. It's not that speakers have no vocabulary. When you use words over and over again, it suddenly makes people think, hey, what is he saying? So that is a flourish. I'll give you another example of a flourish. This is from a convocation speech which I gave to the students on one of the occasions. Promise yourself to always give the best. Promise yourself to be just as enthusiastic about the success of others as you will be about your own success. Promise yourself to press on for greater achievements in the future. Promise yourself to live in the faith that the whole world is on your side. Promise yourself to think well of yourself and to proclaim this fact to the world that you are proud officers of ICICI. I'm just giving you an example. Promise yourself. Now, this is an example of flourish. Flourish is repetitive use of words. The common way in which flourishes are used, it is at the commencement. Sometimes the flourish can come at the end. I'll just give you an example. Flourishes can come at the beginning, in the middle, or at the end. Look at this example. The idea was flawed. The planning was flawed. The execution was flawed. So, repetitive use of words coming at the beginning or at the end, all these would represent flourishes. Look at speakers who have a mark in the way they speak. They are people who use rhetorical questions, they use flourishes. Not enough. You have to go to the third step, and that is what we call phrases and words. Now, phrases and words are often decided at the time of your preparation, and that is the third step in public speaking excellence, and that is, what do you mean by saying phrases and words? Phrases and words refer to those words which are used in public speaking, which will be remembered forever. When the Prime Minister spoke to the nation and said, blood and water cannot flow together, he was saying something which those words, blood and water cannot flow together. He was referring to the terrorism as well as the sharing of waters, and then he said blood and water cannot flow together. When during the Independence Day, the Prime Minister gave a 90-minute speech, at one point he said, reform, perform, transform. Those three words became the headlines for the editorial. Those three words were given enough publicity. All the papers put that as the headline. Reform, perform, transform. The speech may be forgotten. Words and phrases are important, because if these words and phrases are chosen carefully, they will be remembered forever. When Winston Churchill spoke to the nation, his nation, during the Second World War, he said blood, sweat, toil, tears. And those words are remembered more than the rest of the speech. It's all forgotten. But people remember blood, sweat, toil, tears. That is what he can offer his countrymen. That's what he said. What I am trying to tell you is, words and phrases chosen carefully will always be remembered. You must take care of this when you give a speech, an important speech, so that those words and phrases will always be remembered. When President Pranab Mukherjee spoke, when there was a lot of disruption of Parliament, he said, let there be debate, let there be discussion, let there be dissent, let there be delay, but let there be decision. Words chosen carefully, but conveying something very important. And that is the significance of using words and phrases. If you can put your thought into this, your speech will have an impact which you would never have imagined. So take care of at least one rhetorical question, one or two flourishes, and maybe one or two words and phrases which people will always, it's like a take-home message. Even if they forget everything else, these words and phrases are remembered. Then comes punch line. The last step in the third stage is punch line. A punch line is what goes against the general expectation, against the grain. You expect something, but what you hear is something different. When you walk on the road and a beggar stretches his hand in front of you, is he asking for a coin? Is he asking for bread? Is he asking for cloth? He is not asking for coin. He is not asking for bread. He is not asking for a piece of cloth. He is asking for his right to live like you and me. You suddenly turn that entire thinking process to say something else. He is not asking for anything material. He is asking for his right to live like you and me. We are here to speak about Mahatma Gandhi, the man who won freedom for India, the apostle of non-violence. Mahatma Gandhi, who showed the world through simplicity and through example, he can change a nation. Mahatma Gandhi, who was the paragon of all that is wonderful in human values. Mahatma Gandhi, the man who showed the world it is possible to free a country without bloodshed. Today, I am going to speak about Mahatma Gandhi, his experiments with sex. Suddenly, you don't expect this. All these lofty things I say, and then suddenly, of course, not that sex is not lofty, but what I am trying to say is, you suddenly take it to a point where you go to something totally unexpected. That's a punchline. It's almost like a punch that you give to the audience. Suddenly it wakes them up and say, what is he going to say? This is something different. It's deviant. So a punchline given in the early part, a punch given in the early part of your speech will wake up people who are already had enough speeches. They're probably not going to listen to you at that time. Give one punch, and that is the punchline. You give a punch so that people suddenly wake up. May not always be possible, but when you attempt to give a speech, if you can keep that in mind, it will make a big difference. The World Environment Day is celebrated in June, and Everybody was speaking about the external environment, the importance of keeping it clean, the importance of keeping it green. And at that time, in the speech which I gave to the students, I said, it's not important, not so important that you keep the external environment green. It is more important that you keep your internal environment clean. What do I mean by this? I want to recall what Mahatma Gandhi said. Keep your thoughts positive because your thoughts become your words. Keep your words positive because your words become your behavior. Keep your behavior positive because your behavior becomes your attitude. Keep your attitude positive because your attitude become your values. Keep your values positive because your values become your destiny. What I wanted to convey was the internal environment is perhaps as important, if not more important, for you to become a better person. And that is conveyed through a punchline, almost saying that it's not so important to keep the extra while you take care of your thoughts. It all starts with the thoughts. So punchline is something that will arrest the attention of the audience. If you can do this, you will be able to get the attention of the people who are listening to you. Now, these are the ingredients of any public speech. This might look a little bit cumbersome in terms of structure, but please remember, the best public speeches have most of these ingredients. Looking back at any speech, or starting from today, every public speech must be a learning experience for you. Look at it with how many of these ingredients are there, and the best ones will often have almost all these ingredients. This, in a nutshell, constitutes the rudiments of public speaking, the summary of any public speech. I will now go on to welcome address and vote of thanks, and after that, how to introduce a chief guest, and then how to be a master of ceremony.